So first, let's talk about agenda. So this is will be only 1 hour webinar, and we will talk about in the high level what's Alteryx is and what's a UiPath. So basically, when we talk about Alteryx, we call this as analytic process automation, which is an APA. So when we talk about the UiPath, we often refer to as RPA, like a robotic process automation. So from the name, you both both talking about the process automation. So what's the difference of them, and how we can, you know, leverage and also learn, or maybe to see, hey, when to use the Alteryx, when to use the UiPath, and then I will just show you two demo. One is to use the UiPath to run the Alteryx processes, and another demo will be opposite way, use the Alteryx to call or run the UiPath process. So after that, we're just gonna have the Q&A session. All right. So first of all, let's just take a look. In case you already have the experience with the Alteryx and the UiPath, just give you like a recap or overview of what these two tools are able to do, or what type of the automation we can achieve. So first of all, let's take a look at what's the Alteryx platform here. So Alteryx is the which we call the end-to-end data analytic platform. So you are able to automate, I would say, most or 80% of the data automation process you can just build in the Alteryx platform. So from the left to the right, you can see when we're trying to connect to the file, or whether we're trying to start with the database, and then we're trying to automate the process from there and perform some data blending, data prep, or diagnostic reporting, or geospatial, or even predictive analysis like machine learning, prescriptive, and any AI. And also Alteryx allows you to embed or integrate existing, if you have the R code or Python code or any other actually script you developed, you trying to integrate with the Alteryx, you're able to do that. So to the end of the automation, you're also able to publish your data to the business intelligence tools like Tableau or Power BI, or like you can also push to the RPA tool, like in our case, like UiPath. Also, you're able to create the email and with attachment, send out the notification. So you can do all kinds of stuff. So one of the biggest kind of advantage of the Alteryx, it's offer you many tools which allows you to do the drag and drop, and it's all in the just one tools, user friendly. So next thing, when we finish develop the workflow in the Alteryx, we might start thinking, hey, how we can schedule that, and if the workflow number increased, we're also trying to find a way to centralize to govern those workflows. So that's how we bring in the Alteryx Server. So notice, first of all, we develop the workflow in the Alteryx Designer. Then when we trying to share to other users, we can publish to the Alteryx Server. So for those business users, they can just go to the Alteryx Server to like run the process, get a report back, and also, is a great way to kind of centralize the govern those workflows. So you can use the user interface of which we call the Alteryx Gallery, to see or to run to govern the workflow, or you can leverage the Alteryx Server API or Gallery API to call our Alteryx process. So when we talk about the Alteryx integration with the UiPath, we mainly leverage the Alteryx Gallery API to do that. So next page is what we're going to discuss this is, so first of all, you need to enable the API access. Then once you get an API access from your Alteryx server administrator, you can start to leverage those API. So once if you want to integrate with the other applications, so in our case, UiPath, or you trying to integrate with the other application, like hey, you trying to write a Python code which call the API to run the process. You can do this as well. So in these slides, it's showing the different endpoint. This is the REST API of the Alteryx Gallery, and so you can just leverage those REST API endpoint to build your process. So we discussed about the Alteryx Designer, Alteryx Server, and the Alteryx Gallery API. So what about the RPA, right? So when we talk about RPA, again, that's a robotic process automation. It's also the tool allows us to build the workflows to automate our manual process. And when we talk about UiPath is just one tool in the RPA category. And there's also different components for the UiPath, similar to the Alteryx. So in the Alteryx, we have Alteryx Designer to develop the workflows. In the UiPath, we have UiPath Studio, allows you to design the process. And in the Alteryx, we have the Alteryx engine to execute those workflows. And the UiPath, we have the UiPath robot to execute and host those process. And similar to the Alteryx, we have the Alteryx server to run, schedule, govern those workflows. In the UiPath, we have the UiPath orchestrator, which also is that kind of Weber-based, give the interface to deploy, schedule the robot and the process. So it's in this structure, the components, they are very similar, but they call different things. And in most case, you can both, either leverage the Alteryx or the UiPath to build your own use case. So the next question you might be asked, so if I have the Alteryx, why I use the like a UiPath, right, RPA tool, or if I already have the UiPath or RPA tool in my organization, why I should use the Alteryx, right? So these two tools, they both in common is, so first, they both offer the drag and drop interface. So in case you don't have any coding background and you are just, dealing with the Excel and trying to automate the process and don't know how to coding. So both tools can offer you, code-free interface. You can just drag and drop and build your logic in the process and save to a workflow and starting running that. So they both offer that. Also, if you are trying to run some code or develop some code and integrate with the rest of the process, you can also able to do that either in the Alteryx or in the UiPath. So by achieving that, we can leverage the power of the command line in the Alteryx, or in the UiPath, there's an activity called a start process. So you can just both leverage those and to integrate with your existing workflows. So those are the in common. So what's the difference here, right? So by just looking at the name, you might be saying, hey, UiPath is a robotic process. So when we talk about your robotic process, from my understanding, it's more like, hey, if you have the API, you are trying to integrate or you trying to automate the process with other application with the API, that's good. But what if you don't have API with those applications, right? So in that case, you can leverage the UiPath and just recording whatever the step you're trying to achieve, and the UiPath will just save those steps you just performed and save as a workflow, and you can just next time you can just run that. So the one of the use case is, hey, you open the application. Again, this application may or may not have the API, and then you do some data entry, right? So once you do finish the data entry, you just close the application. So this type of the function or the use case is very, I think it will be the very good use case for the UiPath. And again, UiPath can achieve a lot of the things. So when we talk about the Alteryx, we're talking about analytic process, right? So it's all around data. So if you are trying to dealing something with data, or you're trying to, hey, run the report or build a report, or you're trying to writing something to your database, or you're trying to perform the geospatial analysis, or even machine learning, you can do those things in the Alteryx without any issues. Alteryx will just provide those pre-built tools for you. You can just drag that into your canvas and enter your parameter, and you don't need to write any code. And so just create a report, right? So this is one of the main difference from my understanding. Again, when to use the UiPath or use the Alteryx. Okay, so when we finish discussing the difference, if you leverage one use case using the UiPath and another use case using the Alteryx, you might be wondering how we can bring these two process all together, right? So you don't even want to manually run those one workflow in the Alteryx and one workflow in the UiPath. You're just trying to chain this together and just schedule that, right? So next, we're just gonna discuss how we can leverage the API or any or executable to chain these two tools all together. So first, I will discuss use the UiPath to run the Alteryx process. So there's a couple of things you need to prepare when you're trying to configure from the UiPath to the Alteryx. So first of all, you have the Alteryx workflow, and you need to publish to the Alteryx Server Gallery, and so from local, and then you need to enable the API access. So in case you don't, just ask the Alteryx Server administrator to give you the API access, so you can get the API key and the secret for your Alteryx Private Studio. Then from the UiPath side, you need to install what they call the Alteryx Activity Pack. So this Activity Pack is nothing but the all kinds of different REST API, but UiPath just wrap them up as the activity. So once you finish that, you can just start in building the process in the UiPath, then just trigger the process from the Alteryx server. So I will just give you the demo later. Let's just go through these steps real quick. So first of all, like I described, this is interface in the Alteryx server gallery. So I already published one workflow to the server. So you can see this workflow called a session one Excel to Alteryx, and in this interface, you can just, if you're a business user, you can just go into this interface and click run. So this will just give you the result. And next step is you go to the Alteryx server gallery again to grab your key and the secret, which will be used in the next step. So again, you can see this is the endpoint. and you can build not only in the UiPath, but you can leverage any other programming language or any tools, leverage the REST API to build your solution. So next step will be to download the Alteryx Activity Pack. So you can see here. Notice here, this is in the UiPath, not in the Alteryx. And if you go to the Manage Package, you're able to search for that. Let me just switch my window and give you the idea here. Okay, so this is the UiPath interface. You can see on the top we have different options. My favorites will be the screen scripting or record your actions. And on your left, you have the activity here. So if you're trying to install the Alteryx Activity Pack, I just mentioned here, so you need to go to the Manage Package and go to All Package and search for the keywords Alteryx. So there should be one package called UiPath Alteryx.activities. So you can just install that. Once you finish, and on this tab, this is the Activity tab. And if you search for the Alteryx, you should be able to see all the Alteryx package and the activities. So you can see what we can achieve. Or here is get an app, or get a job, or get a workflow, or you can even call the Alteryx workflow. So each activity will be the one Alteryx Gallery REST API endpoint. So just give you an idea here. So let's just go back to the slide. So once you finish that, you need to configure the connection with the URL and the key and the secret key. So you can see this this interface is from the UiPath. And also you're able to see this is just activity, so just give you a nice interface. You can just enter any filter or any parameter the API expecting, so you can just run. So let me just go back to this UiPath and just give you an idea how we can configure the connection here. So you need to use this Alteryx application scope. So this is how you can set up the Alteryx connection in the UiPath. So once you finish, there will be the button called configure. And you click on that, and it's just ask you the base URL, client ID, which is the API, the Gallery API, just show you in the slides. So this is just a key, and this is just the API secret key. So once you finish that, you can just test the connection, and this should test the successful here if you configure everything correctly. All right, so this is essential, I would say essential 4 steps you have to do if you want to build your first process to make sure, hey, I have the UiPath and trying to call the Alteryx workflow. So next, I will just give you the demo I just described here. So first, I will just configure the Alteryx Gallery API in the UiPath, and then I will just leverage the different activity in the UiPath and trying to call the one workflow which I published in our Alteryx server. So let me just jump to that. So first of all, just give you a background of what type of workflow I'm trying to run here. Okay, so first I will just go to our Alteryx server gallery. And I just have one workflow. And you can see this is just the name here. And I'm just trying to run in here. And you can see this workflow is asking for one parameter. So how many decimal places for the home value. So this is just one thing I set up, and to dynamically change the output format. So if I just manually change to 3, or let's just do 3 and click run. So this will just trigger the workflow and the run and create a report. Okay, so once finished, I will just download this, just give you the idea of what this report look like. Okay, so the prompt, the decimal places I just choose here is directly affecting the decimal place for this column here. So you can see the home value here, and with 3 decimal places with 3 zeros. So you can see if I'm just the Alteryx user and only have the Alteryx server, so I can just go here and run this workflow. Now we're trying to bring in the UiPath here, right? So I don't want to go into this server and run this manually, but instead I trying to ask the UiPath workflow to trigger this for me, right? And also notice here there's also extra step we need to figure out, which is this input, right? So we need to input, hey, how many decimal places we want for this report. So I also want the UiPath to handle this piece, which is dynamically change this value, right? So maybe you have upper streams, menu process help you decide this type of the parameter, and then you just feed into the downstream process. In our case, this is a workflow, and enter here, then just trigger this workflow, right? Okay, so by leverage that in the UiPath, again, we first need to set up the connection. So by leverage this, call it Alteryx application scope. So this is all the activity will be under this scope. And again, we need to make sure you enter the URL. And this is Alteryx Gallery API key and the secret. And you test OK. So you can just starting building the workflow, right, in the UiPath here. So we're just trying to perform a few steps here. So first of all, we want to leverage the API activity which called get workflows. And notice we have other workflows in our Alteryx server. So we're only trying to search for the workflow I'm trying to run, right? So in our case, I can just use a filter and the keywords Excel. So by type this, and this activity will just search for the Alteryx server, only search for the workflow containing keywords Excel. Then once this finish, and return a list. And this list, we will just further start building the next step here is for each workflow we're finding, we're trying to run the workflow. So in our use case, it's very straightforward since there will be only one workflow with the keywords Excel. So if I just go back, so if you want to make sure, I highly recommend you go to this page. This is just the Gallery API. You can test those endpoints. And this is exactly the same endpoint when you're trying to use the get workflow activity in the UiPath here. So this endpoint is called workflow subscription. And when we just put the Excel keywords into that box, it's equivalent to we put the keywords here, and then you just try run this REST API endpoint here. So let me just try out here. So just give you an idea of this return. So you can see I entered Excel, and this is just a response. So you can see there's only one response with the file name, session 1 Excel to Alteryx. And next step, we're just trying to run the job, and based on the response, and we just assign the workflow ID and to this activity. And then we need to configure the answer here. So again, we're only working with one workflow. And if you refresh that, this should give you the prompt, what we just saw in the Alteryx interface. You need to give the how many decimal places for the prompt here. So notice here, I put a variable here instead of the hard code 1, 2, or 3. So notice here, this is a variable in the UiPath variable. And for the real business use case, you might don't want to hard code any value, but instead you want the process to figure out that for you and pass that to the next step, right? So this is exactly what this is trying to do. So once you run this job and parse this decimal place variable value to that, and we'll just get a job result. And notice the output of the workflow we just showed will just give you the Excel file output, right? So we might want to save to the folder, maybe your local drive. And in our case, in the UiPath, I do an extract step. I also have a message box, which will give us the message, hey, this has been saved. And also I ask the UiPath to open the saved folder to us, so we don't need to go to that folder and manually click open. So let me just run this, the whole workflow. Yep. So it usually take about like 30 seconds. The process need to talk to the gallery and trigger couple APIs here and save to the folder. Okay, so I have the message box here. So you can see the output have been saved to this folder. And I click OK. And you can see this will just give me back the UiPath workflow, and also this automatically open this folder for me. And if I go to the output, and by looking at the datetime, so you can see this is the one I just ran and just saved. So by default, this will save to us a raw file extension. So if we just change this to Excel and click open, so we should able to see the exactly report what we just ran using the Alteryx Server interface. So you can see here, when we're looking at the last column here, so decimal places is also 3. So the reason because here is, so you can see I'm assigning this variable, the decimal place in the UiPath, and I put the number 3 here. So just for demo purpose, but in the real use case, you might need to replace this and decide from the other steps here. So just to summarize what we just did here. So we first have the published workflow to the Alteryx server, and we're trying to leverage the Alteryx Gallery API to trigger this workflow. So by doing this, the demo I just showed is by leverage the UiPath Alteryx Activity Package, right? So you can see we have a couple different activities for you to use, and you can just drag and drop here, right? So in this case, you don't need to write any code. Just by enter any, the keys and any keywords you're trying to filter out, and all the way to the final destination, which in our case, we're just trying to save to the folder. Okay. So this is the first demo, which we just use the UiPath to trigger the Alteryx process. Okay, so I got a question in the Q&A. I just read this. Could this RPA bot run in attended mode? In our case, yes, because there's nothing you are trying. There's no manual step required for running this, and the only step I would say the only step you need to figure out, hey, how you decide this decimal place. If you have the certain process here can decide for you, hey, you can just enter here and dynamically change this place, this value, and then you can just schedule this. Okay, so let me know if you have any questions. So again, this is using the UiPath to call the Alteryx. And next demo I'm just gonna discuss is how we can use the Alteryx to call the UiPath. So this will be the opposite way, right? So just give you the idea, hey, how these two tools can work in different kind of dimension or angle. All right. So first of all, from the UiPath, we have the Alteryx Activity Package. But in the Alteryx, we don't have such like hey UiPath connector, which allows you to install in the Alteryx Designer, right? So how we can trigger that? So the way we can do this is to leverage the executable, which called UI robot.exe. So this is just the way we can also use the run command tool in the Alteryx Designer to trigger the XAML file from the UiPath. So the key concept here is we can run in this command by calling UI robot.exe dash file, and you parse the XAML file. So you can just call the UiPath process, and all this command is included in this run command tool in the Alteryx, so you can just use the Alteryx to run that. So just give you the demo here. So what are we trying to achieve? So first of all, we have the Alteryx workflow, or we call the analytic app, so which allows the user to enter the company stock ticker. And what Alteryx can trying to do is first to create a URL. So based on this ticker, I want to create a URL for the Yahoo Finance. For example, the Alteryx. So Alteryx URL, I will have a formula in the Alteryx to construct the full URL for the Yahoo Finance. Then the workflow can save to the CSV file, then also write the data to the database, and also send a notification like to through the email. And also, we also want to ask the UiPath to do is to trigger the UiPath workflow and open the browser and enter this URL and go into that Yahoo Finance page. Okay, so in our task, you can see some functionality, some steps we're trying to perform in the Alteryx, and some of the steps we're trying to perform in the UiPath, and we're trying to link these two together. Okay. So let me just switch to the Alteryx. Okay, so first of all, I have the Alteryx workflow, which can trigger the UiPath. And I also have the UiPath workflow, which can open the browser based on the URL. So let me just run this UiPath workflow first, which will, it's doing very simple steps here, which just read the CSV file first, then grab the URL and assign to a variable. Then I use that open browser activity here to open that URL and give me the message box. So let me just run this. Okay. So you can see from the UiPath, it's open the Yahoo Finance, right? And by default, I set up for the Alteryx ticker. So it's open for the Alteryx. Let me just close that. And also have the message box here, right? So instead of I'm just directly running from the UiPath, I'm trying to use the Alteryx to run that, right? Maybe this is in the larger scope. This is just one thing you're trying to automate, but in the upstream, you maybe also want to write to the database, send out email notifications, so all the stuff you can all build in the Alteryx, then just trigger the UiPath to open the browser, right? So this is a workflow and look like I just give you the idea here. So first of all, I have the company ticker here, and I just use the one formula tool to construct the URL for the Yahoo Finance. And once I finish that, I will write this data into our internal SQL Server table, which called a ticker log. And also I will save to the CSV file called a URL. So once this file finished, this will just I will trigger the UiPath. The UiPath will just read this URL.csv and open the browser. And once all this finished, the Alteryx will just send out the email and notify the user, hey, the ticker has been entered and the browser has been opened. So let me just run this. In the app mode. So this app will just ask what type of the company ticker you're trying to enter here. So by default, it's a AYX, which is a ticker for the Alteryx. I will just use another one, which will be Apple, and click on Finish. Okay, so first window I have here is you can see it's a trigger for the robot, and you can see it's an open the website for the Apple here, right? So notice how this connect all together, right? So first I enter the Apple ticker, and this will just create this URL for the Apple in the Yahoo Finance, and this value will write to the URL.csv file. And the UiPath being triggered here by the UI robot, and the UI robot will read this URL and open this in the browser. So that's how you can see here. And also I get another message box telling me, hey, it's opening here, right? Opening the AAPL. Okay. Let me try one more time. I think something happened with my database. Okay. So this time I'm just running by default the Alteryx ticker and this app finish, which give me this window. And I can also open this URL file. So this file is nothing but just a ticker URL and time. This will be right to the database. And what's more, it's not showing here is if I just go to my inbox, so you can see this will be the notification. The ticker has been logged, and also the ticker has been opened in the browser. So you can see that's how I set up here is send the notification email here. Okay, so this is the next use case. Just give you also summarize what we have done here. Is first of all, I set up the UiPath workflow, which open when you are out in the browser, which go to the Yahoo Finance. And instead of running in the UiPath, I'm develop Alteryx workflow, which construct the URL and the writing to the database and also save to the CSV file. Then I trigger this UiPath workflow to open this browser. So once this finish, this will just send the notification to myself, notify me, hey, these all steps have been performed and without any issues. All right. Okay, let me just go back to the slides. Okay, so again, just let me know if you have any questions. This is just two, I would say, two simple use case, how we can integrate the UiPath and the Alteryx. So there may be other solution. I will just give you a brief introduction. So you may be wonder when we talk about the UiPath to the Alteryx, we leverage the API, but when we in the opposite, use the Alteryx to call the UiPath, we leverage executable here, right? So, but in fact, we can leverage both, right? So that's how when we use the UiPath to call the Alteryx, you can also use the command line. So in the Alteryx, we have one executable called Alteryx engine command.exe, so which kind of doing very similar thing with the UI robot.exe, right? So you can just execute that workflow and leverage this executable. So one thing to mention here is if you want to allow this to run, you need to have an extra license for the automation. So this is one thing to keep in mind. And when we talk about the Alteryx to call the UiPath, so the method I just introduced by leverage the UI robot, right? So which is executables. But we also could leverage the UiPath orchestrator API. So it's also the REST API, and you can just leverage the API and build your own process and integrate with the Alteryx. So Alteryx provide the many tools for you to develop such solutions. So Alteryx have like a Python tool, so you can just develop the Python script, which called the orchestrator REST API, or you can just develop some other tool, use the run command in the Alteryx, and the trigger from there, right? So just give a different option for you to start think about how can you just build the best solution and best suitable for your um, use case. Okay, so that's all for today's content. Again, so I just introduced one way from the UiPath to the Alteryx, and another is from the Alteryx to the UiPath, and hopefully just give you an idea how these two tools can connect or integrate with each other. And if you have some use case in the UiPath, some use case in the Alteryx, so you trying to bring those all together and just schedule that. You don't want to manually run from one tool and manually run from another tool, and you're trying to chain those. So this is the way you can achieve here. So if you have any questions, definitely the Alteryx community will be the best place to go. And also for our webinar, we will be after this webinar, we'll be sharing this recording, and we're also gonna publish the recording to our Data Meaning YouTube channel. So in case you missed it, you're trying to review that, you can go there, and also just the link also will be sitting in your um, email inbox. And also you can send me the email in case you're trying to work on specific use case you want to discuss. And just reach out to me so we can just discuss further. All right, so that's for today's content. Let me know if you have any final questions. If not, I hope you enjoy the rest of the day and see you in the next webinar.